The bravest souls are rarely the loudest. Sometimes they are simply the ones willing to crawl where no one else dares. Dawn had barely touched the jagged peaks of Dragon Ridge when Emily Carter pressed both trembling hands against the ancient stone, her quiet breathing almost disappearing beneath the whisper of the mountain wind. Hundreds of feet below, an entire kingdom watched in stunned silence, though none of them realized what she was truly climbing toward. From the valley floor, all they could see was the small figure of a young Omega dressed in a faded gray traveling cloak, slowly making her way toward the forbidden summit that no hunter, no warrior, and no alpha had entered for generations. Every child in the Northern Territories had grown up hearing the same warning. Never disturb the mountain where the dragon sleeps. It was more than a legend. It was law. Even the oldest wolves lowered their voices whenever they spoke its name. Dragon Ridge was believed to be the resting place of an ancient guardian whose single breath could shake forests and whose heartbeat echoed through the stone beneath the mountain. No one challenged the stories because no one ever returned with proof. They simply stayed away. Yet this morning, every pair of eyes followed Emily. She was only 22, an Omega whose gentle nature had earned more pity than respect. While other wolves trained with blades or competed to prove their strength, Emily gathered herbs, mended injured birds, and spent long afternoons tending abandoned gardens behind the village sanctuary. People often smiled kindly when she passed, but kindness was not the same as belief. They believed she had a good heart. They did not believe she could change anything. The whispers spread quickly through the crowd gathered below. She will turn back. She has no chance. Someone should stop her. But no one moved. Hours earlier, a royal messenger had delivered devastating news. The Alpha King's great wolf, the enormous silver guardian that had protected the royal family for nearly 2 decades, had vanished into Dragon Ridge after chasing a strange scent during the night. Scouts later discovered traces of white fur near the forbidden summit, but every rescue party refused to continue once they realized where the trail led. Even the king's most experienced guards understood that crossing into the dragon's resting place could bring disaster to everyone below. So they waited, hoping for a miracle they did not expect to receive. Emily had listened without speaking. She remembered the great wolf differently than everyone else. Years ago, during a harvest celebration, she had watched the magnificent creature gently nudge a frightened little boy away from a frightened horse before calmly walking back to the king's side. While others admired its strength, Emily had noticed its patience. Since then, she had quietly believed that any creature capable of showing such gentleness deserved the same in return. She packed a small leather satchel with dried mountain herbs, clean linen, fresh spring water, and the healing salve she mixed herself every full moon. She never announced her plan. She simply started walking before sunrise. Now the climb grew steeper with every careful step. Cold mist drifted across the cliffs, covering the narrow trail until even the next few feet disappeared into white silence. Tiny wildflowers somehow clung to cracks in the rock, their pale blue petals trembling against the morning breeze. Emily paused long enough to brush one with her fingertips before continuing upward. Her grandmother had once told her that hope often survived in impossible places. She carried those words with every breath. Far below, the royal banners fluttered beside rows of armored guards. At their center stood Alpha King Nathaniel Blackwood, his tall figure perfectly still as he stared toward the mountain. His silver-gray eyes never left the tiny silhouette climbing into the clouds. No one dared interrupt his silence. He had already lost hope once this morning. He refused to lose it again. Emily finally reached a broad stone ledge where the wind suddenly disappeared. The silence became so complete that she could hear the gentle rhythm of her own heartbeat. Then she noticed something unusual. The ground beneath her was strangely warm despite the mountain air. Another careful step revealed enormous bronze-colored scales stretching farther than her eyes could follow, each one larger than a carriage wheel, glimmering softly beneath centuries of dust. Her heartbeat stopped for one impossible moment. She had not reached the dragon's resting place. She was already standing on it. Emily did not move for what felt like an entire minute. The bronze scales beneath her boots were not cold like ordinary stone. They held a quiet warmth that rose through the soles of her worn leather shoes, carrying a slow rhythm that matched the deep pulse echoing beneath the mountain. It was so gentle that anyone rushing through the moment would have mistaken it for distant thunder, but Emily knew better. She was standing on the back of the ancient dragon itself. Her breath caught in her chest as she slowly lifted her eyes. The enormous body disappeared into rolling clouds, each scale reflecting faint streaks of morning light, like weathered bronze polished by centuries of wind and rain. There was no end in sight. The stories had never described how impossibly vast the guardian truly was. Children imagined monsters. Elders spoke of legends. Neither had prepared her for this overwhelming silence. The dragon was sleeping, and somehow the entire mountain had learned to breathe with it. Emily carefully lowered one knee, placing her fingertips against a single scale. It felt surprisingly smooth, worn by countless seasons, yet strong enough to carry forests upon its back. She whispered a quiet apology that almost disappeared into the still air. "I do not wish to disturb your rest. Someone needs my help." The dragon did not respond. Only the steady rise and fall beneath her feet continued. She closed her eyes for one brief moment, gathered every ounce of courage she possessed, and began crawling forward. Every movement became deliberate. Her hands searched for the spaces between the scales while her knees slid carefully across the warm surface. She avoided loose stones, held her cloak close against the breeze, and even timed each breath with the slow rhythm beneath her. She had no idea whether any of it mattered, but kindness had always guided her before fear. Far below, the people gathered in the valley had completely lost sight of her. Thick bands of white mist wrapped around the dragon's enormous body until the mountain itself seemed to disappear into the clouds. Some believed she had already turned back. Others quietly assumed the journey had ended. Alpha King Nathaniel Blackwood remained silent. His gaze never left the ridge where Emily had vanished. One of his commanders stepped forward cautiously. "Your Majesty, the clouds are closing. We should prepare to leave before the weather worsens." Nathaniel did not answer immediately. Instead, he remembered the expression on the young Omega's face before sunrise. She had not looked fearless. She had looked determined. There was a difference that only a true leader recognized. "We wait," he finally said. "As long as hope is climbing that mountain, we wait." The command spread through the royal guards, and not another word was spoken. High above them, Emily continued inch by inch. Time seemed to lose meaning. Minutes blended into hours as sunlight slowly climbed across the sky. At one point, a small mountain bird landed only a few feet away, chirped softly, and flew ahead before circling back as though inviting her to follow. Emily smiled despite the tension filling every muscle. It reminded her of the sparrows she used to feed behind the sanctuary. Even here, life still found reasons to trust. Eventually, the bronze scales began sloping downward. The dragon's immense shoulder curved toward a narrow ledge carved into the mountainside. Emily eased herself onto solid ground and released the longest breath she had taken all morning. She glanced back only once. The ancient dragon remained asleep, its peaceful presence almost impossible to believe after everything she had heard growing up. She bowed respectfully before turning toward the narrow passage ahead. Fresh paw prints marked the dusty stone. They were enormous, each nearly as wide as a dinner plate, yet their edges remained sharp, meaning they had been left only hours earlier. Emily's heartbeat quickened. She reached into her satchel to make certain her healing herbs, clean cloth, and small bottle of spring water were still secure. Everything was exactly where she had packed it. She followed the trail through towering cliffs where patches of sunlight slipped between ancient rocks. The air smelled of pine, damp earth, and something else she recognized immediately: silver pine blossom. It only grew near the purest mountain springs, and wounded wolves were often drawn to its scent because of the cool water nearby. Hope quietly returned to her tired steps. Then she heard it. It was not a roar or a cry for help. It was a single slow exhale carried gently by the wind, followed by complete silence. Emily froze, listening with every instinct she possessed. Somewhere just beyond the next bend, hidden beneath the shadow of the cliffs, the Alpha King's great wolf was waiting. Emily followed the sound with slow, careful steps until the narrow passage opened into a hidden valley tucked between towering cliffs. The place felt untouched by time. Crystal clear water flowed from a natural spring into a small pool surrounded by silver pine blossoms that shimmered beneath the afternoon sunlight. Gentle streams of light filtered through the stone above, filling the quiet sanctuary with a soft golden glow. For a brief moment, she forgot the impossible journey that had brought her here. Then she saw him. The Alpha King's great wolf rested beside the spring, his magnificent silver coat reflecting hints of white and pale blue beneath the dancing light. Even while lying peacefully against the grass, he seemed larger than any wolf Emily had ever imagined. His broad shoulders rose and fell with slow, measured breaths. One powerful paw rested near the edge of the water while his long tail curled beside him. His eyes remained closed, yet there was nothing frightening about the sight before her. Instead, he looked tired, as though he had wandered farther than even his legendary strength could comfortably carry him. Emily remained perfectly still. Every lesson her grandmother had ever taught her returned at once. Never rush toward a frightened animal. Let it feel your kindness before it sees your hands. She slowly removed her satchel from her shoulder and gently placed it upon the ground. The sound was barely louder than a falling leaf. The great wolf's ears twitched almost immediately. His silver eyes opened with quiet alertness, searching the peaceful valley until they settled upon the young Omega standing several yards away. Neither of them moved. The mountain breeze carried the scent of fresh herbs from Emily's satchel across the clearing. She could see curiosity replacing caution inside the ancient wolf's calm gaze. Very slowly she lowered herself to one knee so she would appear smaller. "Hello," she whispered with a warm smile. "I am not here to take you home before you are ready. I only came because I hoped you would not have to be alone." The great wolf continued watching her. Emily noticed dried mountain leaves caught within his thick silver fur and the faint signs of exhaustion around his eyes. He had clearly traveled a tremendous distance. She reached into her satchel carefully and removed a small bundle of fragrant herbs wrapped in clean linen. Instead of approaching, she simply laid the bundle upon a flat stone halfway between them before retreating one step. "These always help the animals at the sanctuary feel stronger," she said softly. "If they can help you too, then my climb was worth every step." The wolf lowered his head slightly, drawing in the gentle scent carried by the breeze. Another long moment passed before he rose with surprising grace. His movements remained powerful despite his weariness. Emily held her breath as he crossed the clearing with slow, confident steps. Instead of stopping at the herbs, he continued until he stood only a few feet from her. His silver eyes studied her face with remarkable patience. Emily resisted every instinct to reach forward. Trust, she believed, could never be demanded. It had to be freely given. The great wolf lowered his enormous head until his nose rested near the sleeve of her cloak. He quietly breathed in the scent of lavender, pine, and mountain herbs that surrounded her. Then, to Emily's complete surprise, he gently leaned his head against her shoulder. She closed her eyes as warmth spread through her heart. "Thank you," she whispered, lifting one careful hand to stroke the thick fur along his neck. The great wolf remained completely relaxed beneath her touch. A peaceful silence settled over the hidden valley. Tiny birds landed near the spring without fear. Butterflies drifted among the silver blossoms as though the mountain itself had accepted the meeting. Emily slowly examined the wolf more closely. Near one front leg, she discovered a patch of tangled fur wrapped tightly around several thorny vines that had dried against his coat during his journey through the cliffs. They were not dangerous, but they clearly made every step uncomfortable. "May I help?" she asked quietly. The great wolf looked into her eyes before lowering himself onto the grass once again. Emily smiled with relief. She carefully poured a little fresh spring water over the tangled vines, allowing them to soften before gently separating each strand without causing discomfort. Every movement was slow and deliberate. She hummed the same quiet melody her grandmother had once sung while caring for injured woodland creatures. The great wolf gradually closed his eyes again, his breathing becoming deeper and more peaceful with every passing minute. When the final vine slipped free, Emily brushed the silver fur smooth with the palm of her hand. Just then the great wolf suddenly lifted his head toward the entrance of the valley. His ears stood tall, not with fear, but with recognition. A distant horn echoed through the mountains, followed by the faint sound of horses climbing the lower trails. Emily looked toward the cliffs as the afternoon breeze carried a familiar scent through the hidden sanctuary. The Alpha King had finally reached Dragon Ridge. The distant sounds grew clearer with every passing minute. Horses climbed carefully along the rocky trail below, while polished armor reflected flashes of afternoon sunlight between the towering pines. Emily remained beside the great wolf, one hand resting gently against his thick silver fur. She did not step away. The wolf appeared calm, almost peaceful, as though he had already made a decision that no one else could yet understand. The mountain breeze carried the familiar scent of cedar and steel before the first royal guards appeared beyond the entrance of the hidden valley. They stopped immediately. Every man stood frozen in complete disbelief. None of them had expected to find the legendary guardian resting quietly beside an Omega whom they had barely noticed earlier that morning. One guard instinctively reached toward the hilt of his ceremonial sword before another quietly lowered his arm. There was no danger before them, only silence that seemed too remarkable to disturb. Moments later, Alpha King Nathaniel Blackwood stepped into the valley. His tall figure carried the quiet confidence expected of the ruler of the Northern Territories. Yet the determination in his silver-gray eyes softened the instant he saw the great wolf. Relief crossed his face so briefly that almost no one noticed it. He had searched for this companion since sunrise, fearing every possibility except the one unfolding before him. The great wolf slowly lifted his head and looked toward the Alpha King. Emily expected him to immediately cross the clearing, but he remained exactly where he was. Instead, the magnificent creature leaned lightly against her shoulder once more before calmly rising to his feet. Nathaniel watched every movement without speaking. Throughout many years together, the great wolf had always greeted him first after every journey. Today was different. The enormous silver guardian took only 2 slow steps toward the king before stopping. He turned back toward Emily, waiting quietly as though inviting her to walk beside him. Confused whispers spread among the guards. No one had ever witnessed such behavior. Emily hesitated. "I do not think he wants to leave alone," she said softly, unsure whether she was speaking to the king or to herself. Nathaniel studied the young Omega for a long moment. Her traveling cloak was dusty from the climb. Loose strands of golden-brown hair framed her tired face, and her hands still carried traces of dried herbs from the small bundle resting near the spring. She looked nothing like the fearless warriors who had refused this journey. Yet somehow she had accomplished what none of them could. "Then walk with him," Nathaniel answered quietly. Emily nodded. Together they crossed the clearing, the great wolf matching every step she took. When they finally reached the Alpha King, the wolf lowered his great head beside Nathaniel before gently brushing his shoulder against Emily's arm. The simple gesture carried more meaning than words ever could. Nathaniel rested one hand upon the great wolf's neck while looking directly at Emily. "He trusts very few people," the king said. "I have never seen him choose someone so quickly." Emily lowered her eyes respectfully. "I did not ask him to trust me. I only wanted him to know he was not alone." Those words settled over the valley with unexpected weight. Several guards exchanged thoughtful glances. Strength had always been the language of their kingdom. Compassion was rarely spoken of as something capable of changing destiny. Yet everything before them suggested otherwise. Nathaniel slowly knelt beside the great wolf and examined the freshly cleaned fur near his front leg. The tangled vines were gone. The coat had been gently brushed smooth, and the scent of mountain herbs lingered in the cool air. "You cared for him," Nathaniel said. Emily smiled gently. "He only needed patience." Before anyone could speak again, a deep vibration rolled softly through the ground beneath their feet. It was not violent, nor did it inspire panic. Instead, it felt ancient, like the quiet turning of seasons hidden beneath the mountain itself. The crystal spring formed gentle circles across its surface. Tiny birds that had rested peacefully among the branches suddenly became silent. The great wolf lifted his head toward the cliffs, his silver ears standing tall. Nathaniel followed his gaze. Emily slowly looked back toward the path she had crossed only a short time earlier. High above the hidden valley, beyond the wall of stone and drifting clouds, one enormous bronze eye had quietly opened. No one in the hidden valley reached for a weapon. The single bronze eye gazing down from the cliffs carried no anger, only an ancient awareness that seemed older than the mountains themselves. Every royal guard instinctively lowered his voice until the entire valley became silent again. Even the breeze that had danced through the silver pine blossoms moments earlier seemed to pause. Emily slowly lifted her eyes toward the enormous guardian. The dragon remained almost completely hidden among drifting clouds, revealing only one calm eye and a small portion of its weathered bronze scales. It did not descend. It did not roar. It simply watched. Emily placed one gentle hand upon the great wolf's shoulder without thinking. The magnificent guardian leaned slightly closer to her, his steady breathing unchanged. Alpha King Nathaniel noticed the simple movement immediately. His loyal companion had faced towering creatures, powerful alphas, and endless wilderness without hesitation, yet never before had the great wolf chosen to remain so naturally beside someone he had only just met. Nathaniel looked from the wolf to the young Omega, whose dusty cloak still carried the scent of mountain herbs. Nothing about Emily suggested greatness in the way the kingdom usually measured it. She wore no royal colors. She carried no sword. She possessed no legendary reputation. Yet somehow the mountain itself had allowed her to pass, where every stronger warrior had refused to continue. A senior captain quietly stepped beside the king. "Your Majesty," he whispered, "should we withdraw while the guardian remains calm?" Nathaniel did not answer immediately. His attention remained fixed on the dragon above them. Then he slowly shook his head. "If it wished us gone, we would already know. We will honor its silence with our own." Every guard obeyed without question. Emily felt strangely peaceful despite the impossible moment surrounding her. She had expected fear when the dragon awakened, but instead she sensed something entirely different. The enormous eye studying the valley reminded her of an elderly teacher watching a child solve a difficult lesson without offering help. There was patience within that ancient gaze. Respect. Curiosity. She quietly stepped forward until she stood a little ahead of everyone else. Nathaniel started to call her name before stopping himself. The great wolf followed at her side without hesitation. Emily bowed deeply toward the dragon. "Thank you for allowing me to cross your mountain," she said softly. "I know I was only a guest upon your back. I hope I caused you no discomfort." Her words drifted upward through the still air. For several long heartbeats, nothing happened. Then the dragon performed the smallest movement imaginable. Its enormous eyelid lowered once in a slow, deliberate blink before opening again. The gesture lasted only a moment, yet every elder tale Nathaniel had ever heard returned to him at once. Ancient guardians did not acknowledge those they considered unworthy. The captain beside him quietly drew in his breath. Several guards exchanged stunned glances, but remained respectfully silent. Emily smiled without fully understanding why the simple blink filled her heart with warmth. She bowed once more. "I am grateful." The dragon's eye lingered upon her for another quiet moment before gradually closing again. The deep vibration beneath the valley faded until only the sounds of flowing spring water remained. High above, drifting clouds slowly concealed the ancient guardian once more, and the mountains settled back into peaceful stillness. No one moved for several seconds. It was the great wolf who finally broke the silence. He walked calmly toward the crystal spring, took a long drink of fresh water, then returned to Emily and sat beside her with quiet dignity. Nathaniel could not help smiling. "He has made his choice," he said gently. Emily looked up in surprise. "His choice?" The Alpha King nodded. "He accepts many companions, but he chooses very few. Trust cannot be commanded from him. It must be earned." Emily glanced down at the great wolf, who rested peacefully against her side as though he had known her for years instead of hours. She gently scratched behind one silver ear, earning a contented sigh that brought soft smiles to several of the younger guards. The tension that had gripped the valley since sunrise slowly disappeared. Nathaniel stepped closer. "Emily Carter," he said warmly, "you climbed a mountain every warrior feared, crossed the resting place of an ancient guardian, found the one companion I could not bear to lose, and returned his peace without asking for anything in return. I do not believe this day happened by accident." Before Emily could answer, a single bronze scale, no larger than the palm of her hand, drifted silently from the cliffs above. It floated through the afternoon light like an autumn leaf before landing gently at her feet. The moment it touched the grass, every person in the valley understood they had witnessed something that would be remembered for generations. The bronze scale rested quietly upon the soft grass, glowing with a warm light that seemed to come from within rather than from the afternoon sun above. No one stepped forward to touch it. Every elder in the Northern Territories had grown up hearing stories that the ancient dragon never left behind a single scale without purpose. Some believed such a gift appeared only once in several lifetimes. Others believed no living soul had ever witnessed it at all. Emily looked down at the shimmering bronze surface with quiet uncertainty. She had not climbed the mountain seeking recognition. She had only hoped to bring comfort to a lonely creature. Nathaniel noticed the hesitation in her eyes. "You should accept it," he said gently. "It was left for you." Emily slowly knelt beside the scale. Instead of reaching for it immediately, she bowed her head toward the mountain in silent gratitude. Only then did she lift the remarkable gift with both hands. It was unexpectedly light, no heavier than a large book, and surprisingly warm against her palms. Fine patterns spread naturally across its polished surface like flowing rivers beneath autumn sunlight. As soon as she held it close, a gentle breeze swept through the hidden valley. The silver pine blossoms swayed together while the crystal spring shimmered with tiny circles of light. The great wolf stepped closer until his broad shoulder rested lightly beside hers. Nathaniel watched carefully. "Does it feel strange?" he asked. Emily considered the question before answering. "No," she whispered. "It feels familiar, as though I have forgotten something important and it is patiently waiting for me to remember." Those simple words caused the oldest royal advisor to quietly lift his head. The elderly scholar had climbed the mountain alongside the king despite his age, believing ancient places often carried forgotten truths. He stared at the bronze scale with wide eyes before slowly speaking. "Your Majesty, there are records in the royal library describing gifts like this. They were never rewards for power. They were acknowledgments of character." Nathaniel turned toward him. "You have read of this before?" The old scholar nodded slowly. "Only fragments written many centuries ago. They spoke of guardians who measured hearts instead of strength." Silence settled over the valley once more. Emily gently traced one finger across the smooth bronze surface. As she did, the patterns upon the scale brightened for only an instant before returning to their quiet glow. She looked up in surprise, but no one appeared frightened. Instead, the great wolf lowered his head beside the scale and released a calm breath that almost sounded like contentment. Nathaniel smiled faintly. "He approves." Emily laughed softly for the first time that day, and the sound seemed to lighten the hearts of everyone present. Even several battle-hardened guards found themselves smiling without realizing it. The impossible journey that had begun with fear was slowly becoming something entirely different. A young guard approached respectfully before stopping several feet away. "Your Majesty," he said, "the sun will begin setting within 2 hours. The mountain path will become difficult after dark." Nathaniel nodded but did not immediately order the return. His gaze wandered across the peaceful valley one last time. He understood that places like this did not reveal themselves to ordinary travelers. The crystal spring, the silver blossoms, the sleeping guardian above the cliffs, and now the mysterious bronze scale all seemed connected by a purpose he could not yet explain. Emily carefully wrapped the scale inside the clean linen that had once held her healing herbs before placing it inside her satchel. The moment she secured the flap, another gentle breeze drifted through the valley carrying the sweet fragrance of pine and wildflowers. High above, sunlight slipped through the clouds, casting long golden rays across the mountain slopes. Nathaniel stepped beside her. "We should begin the journey home," he said warmly. "The kingdom deserves to know that hope returned with us today." Emily nodded, but before taking her first step, she turned once more toward the towering cliffs. She placed one hand over her heart and bowed deeply to the unseen guardian resting beyond the clouds. "Thank you," she whispered. Far above, where only drifting mist could be seen, a single deep heartbeat echoed gently through the mountain. It lasted only a moment before fading into complete stillness once again. The great wolf immediately lifted his head toward the sound, his silver eyes shining with quiet understanding. Nathaniel heard it as well. So did every guard standing within the hidden valley. None of them spoke, because each understood the same remarkable truth. The ancient dragon had not simply allowed them to leave. It had chosen to bid farewell to the gentle Omega who had crossed its back with nothing but kindness in her heart. The journey down Dragon Ridge felt completely different from the climb that had brought them there. Hours earlier, every step had carried uncertainty. Now, every quiet footfall echoed with questions that no one could answer. Emily walked beside the great wolf along the narrow mountain trail, while Alpha King Nathaniel remained only a few steps behind. The royal guards surrounded them at a respectful distance, yet no one attempted to separate the remarkable pair. Whenever the path narrowed, the great wolf slowed his pace so Emily could safely cross first, then calmly continued beside her as though protecting a lifelong companion. As the sun drifted lower across the western sky, warm golden light spilled over the mountains, turning the cliffs into glowing walls of amber. Emily paused once to admire the view. She had never climbed this high before, and from the ridge she could see rivers winding through distant forests like ribbons of silver. "It is beautiful," she whispered. Nathaniel heard her. "Many people only see danger when they look at these mountains," he replied. "Very few remember to notice their beauty." Emily smiled gently. "Perhaps both have always been here. We simply choose which one to carry home." The Alpha King considered her words in thoughtful silence. They reminded him of something his father had once said long before he inherited the throne, that wisdom often arrived wearing ordinary clothes. When they reached the broad stone ledge where Emily had first discovered the ancient dragon's resting place, everyone instinctively slowed. The warm bronze scales were hidden once again beneath drifting mist, making the mountain appear perfectly ordinary. Yet every person present knew what rested beneath those clouds. Emily quietly bowed one final time before continuing. She did not expect another sign. The peaceful farewell she had already received was more than enough. As the procession descended toward the valley below, the waiting villagers finally caught sight of the royal banners emerging from the mountain trail. Excited voices spread across the open fields. Then someone noticed the enormous silver figure walking calmly beside the young Omega. Cheers of relief echoed through the valley. Mothers embraced their children. Elderly wolves wiped grateful tears from their eyes. Even those who had doubted Emily that morning found themselves staring in speechless disbelief. The great wolf had returned. More astonishing still, he refused to leave the gentle Omega's side. Emily stopped several yards from the crowd, suddenly overwhelmed by hundreds of eyes watching her. She had never enjoyed attention. She had always preferred quiet gardens and peaceful forests to crowded celebrations. The great wolf sensed her hesitation immediately. He gently brushed his shoulder against hers, giving her the same reassuring comfort she had once offered him beside the crystal spring. Nathaniel noticed the exchange and smiled quietly. "He reminds you that you are not standing alone," he said. Emily nodded with grateful eyes. The oldest women from the nearby village stepped forward first. They had known Emily since childhood. One reached out carefully and brushed a speck of mountain dust from her sleeve. "You climbed all the way to Dragon Ridge?" she asked softly. Emily answered with her usual humility. "I only followed hope." Those simple words spread through the gathering far more quickly than any heroic tale ever could. Children repeated them to one another. Elders exchanged thoughtful glances. The phrase seemed to settle gently into every listening heart. Nathaniel turned toward the assembled crowd. "Today every person standing here witnessed something our kingdom must never forget," he announced. Strength carried many warriors to the foot of the mountain. Compassion carried one gentle Omega all the way to its summit. Complete silence followed. No one argued. No one laughed. Many lowered their eyes, remembering the doubts they had spoken before sunrise. Emily felt uncomfortable hearing praise directed toward herself. She quietly reached into her satchel and touched the linen wrapped around the bronze scale. The gentle warmth still remained. It reminded her that the greatest moments of the day had happened in silence, not before crowds. Just then the elderly royal scholar stepped forward carrying an ancient leather journal that had traveled with him throughout the expedition. He carefully opened several weathered pages before stopping at a faded illustration. His hands trembled slightly as he compared the drawing with the wrapped scale inside Emily's satchel. His expression slowly changed from curiosity to astonishment. Looking first at the scale, then at Emily, he whispered words so softly that only Nathaniel standing beside him could hear them. "Your Majesty, this symbol has not appeared since the age of the first guardians. If these records are true, the dragon did not merely honor her kindness. It recognized someone it has been waiting for." The royal scholar carefully closed the ancient journal, but his hands continued trembling long afterward. Nathaniel studied the elderly man with quiet concern. During many years of service, the scholar had remained calm through wars, harsh winters, and difficult negotiations. Never before had a faded page from an old book unsettled him so deeply. "Tell me everything," Nathaniel said gently. The scholar drew a slow breath before opening the journal once more. The weathered parchment revealed a faded drawing unlike anything Emily had ever seen. At the center of the page rested the image of a bronze dragon scale, marked with graceful lines flowing across its surface exactly like the one now wrapped inside her satchel. Beside it stood a young traveler surrounded by a great wolf and a towering dragon watching from distant mountains. Time had nearly erased the ink, but the resemblance remained unmistakable. Emily looked from the illustration to the scholar with quiet disbelief. "That cannot be me," she whispered. "This book is far older than I am." The old scholar smiled kindly. "No, child, it is not you. It is someone the ancient writers believed would one day appear." Curious villagers gathered closer while remaining respectfully silent. Even the children sensed that something extraordinary was unfolding. The scholar carefully turned another fragile page. "Long before the kingdoms were divided," he explained, "the first guardians believed true peace could never be protected by strength alone. They wrote that one day a gentle heart would remind powerful rulers what they had forgotten. The dragon would recognize that person before anyone else." Nathaniel listened without interrupting. Every sentence seemed to explain another impossible event from the mountain. Why the ancient dragon had remained peaceful. Why the bronze scale had been given freely. Why the great wolf refused to leave Emily's side. None of those moments now appeared accidental. Emily lowered her eyes. "I am only a healer," she said softly. "I have no special gift beyond caring for those who need help." The scholar's expression brightened. "According to these writings, that is exactly why the dragon chose its guardian." His answer settled quietly over the gathered crowd. Many villagers remembered how Emily had spent years helping injured animals, comforting frightened children, and caring for elderly neighbors without ever expecting praise in return. None of those acts had seemed remarkable at the time. Together they now formed a pattern everyone could finally see. Nathaniel stepped closer until he stood beside Emily. "You never climbed that mountain hoping to become important," he said. She gently shook her head. "I only hoped the great wolf would not suffer alone." Nathaniel smiled warmly. "That is precisely what makes today extraordinary." At that moment the great wolf slowly stood and walked toward the center of the gathering. Every conversation immediately faded into silence. The magnificent guardian looked first at Nathaniel, then at Emily. With calm dignity, he lowered himself onto the ground between them before resting one powerful paw across the space separating them. The simple gesture appeared almost ceremonial. The elderly scholar quietly closed his eyes. "Another sign," he whispered. "The first Guardian Chronicles describe this as the bond of trust. The wolf chooses not one protector, but two whose hearts walk the same path." Emily looked toward Nathaniel with gentle surprise. The Alpha King seemed equally thoughtful. Neither of them spoke for several moments. They simply looked at the loyal companion resting peacefully between them while the evening breeze carried the scent of pine across the valley. As the sun touched the distant horizon, its golden light reflected from the bronze scale hidden inside Emily's satchel. A warm glow escaped through the folded linen for only an instant before fading once again. Several nearby villagers noticed it and quietly gasped. The scholar carefully approached Emily. "May I see the scale one more time?" Emily nodded and unwrapped the precious gift with both hands. As soon as the bronze surface touched the evening air, the flowing markings across it became brighter than before. They slowly joined together until they formed a single elegant symbol. The old scholar stared at it in complete amazement. Tears gathered in his eyes. Nathaniel leaned closer. "Do you recognize it?" The scholar could barely find his voice. "Yes, Your Majesty." He gently turned the journal so everyone nearby could see the final illustration hidden upon its last surviving page. The ancient symbol carved above the first guardian sanctuary matched the glowing mark upon Emily's dragon scale perfectly. Beneath the faded drawing appeared one final sentence written in careful script. The scholar read it aloud with quiet reverence. "When kindness awakens the mountain, the path to the forgotten sanctuary shall open once more." As the last word faded into the evening air, a distant beam of golden light suddenly rose from high upon Dragon Ridge, shining through the gathering twilight exactly where no path had existed before. The beam of golden light remained visible above Dragon Ridge until the first evening stars appeared across the darkening sky. No one spoke for several moments because every heart in the valley sensed that the mountain had not revealed a destination to be conquered. It had offered a promise to be honored when the proper time arrived. Nathaniel looked toward the distant summit before turning back to Emily. "The sanctuary has waited through countless generations," he said quietly. "There is no need to rush toward it tonight." Emily nodded with relief. She had never believed that every mystery required an immediate answer. Some gifts deserved patience. The great wolf stood beside her, calm and watchful, as though he agreed completely. The elderly scholar carefully closed the ancient journal and smiled for the first time since opening its weathered pages. "Perhaps that is the final lesson," he said. "The first guardians never chased destiny. They became the kind of people worthy of meeting it." His words settled gently over everyone gathered there. The villagers slowly returned to their homes carrying more hope than fear. Parents told their children what they had witnessed that day. Elders who had once believed the oldest legends were fading into memory now spoke of them with renewed wonder. Before long, the story spreading through the kingdom was not that a dragon had awakened or that an impossible mountain had been crossed. The story people repeated most often was that kindness had accomplished what power alone never could. During the following weeks, quiet changes began appearing throughout the northern territories. Wolves from distant villages were welcomed instead of judged. Young healers found more willing students. Royal soldiers spent time helping rebuild homes damaged by winter storms. Nathaniel noticed the difference every day as he traveled across his lands. The kingdom felt stronger, not because its walls had grown higher, but because its people had become gentler toward one another. Emily returned to her simple cottage near the forest edge, refusing every offer of luxury that came with sudden fame. She continued caring for injured birds, frightened pups, weary travelers, and anyone else who knocked upon her small wooden door. The bronze scale rested safely inside a carved cedar box beside her grandmother's old herbal journal. It never lost its gentle warmth. Sometimes, during quiet evenings, its flowing patterns shimmered softly for only a moment before becoming still again, reminding Emily that some promises remained alive even when unseen. The great wolf visited often. Sometimes he arrived before sunrise, waiting patiently outside while Emily gathered herbs in the morning dew. Other times he simply rested beneath the old oak tree beside her cottage while children laughed and played nearby without fear. They no longer saw him only as the Alpha King's legendary guardian. They saw him as a friend who had chosen to trust the gentlest heart among them. Nathaniel also visited whenever royal duties allowed. Their conversations rarely concerned prophecy or ancient mysteries. Instead, they spoke about the needs of ordinary families, new gardens planted throughout the villages, and simple ways to make the kingdom kinder than it had been before. With every passing season, mutual respect quietly grew into a bond neither of them needed to name. It was built upon shared purpose rather than grand declarations. One peaceful spring morning, Emily stood outside her cottage watching the sunrise paint the distant mountains with soft shades of gold. High above Dragon Ridge, a familiar bronze shape briefly emerged from the morning mist before disappearing into the clouds once again. The sight lasted only a heartbeat, yet Emily smiled as though greeting an old friend. Beside her, the great wolf lifted his head toward the mountain while Nathaniel quietly joined them beneath the oak tree. None of them spoke. They did not need to. The silence itself carried gratitude. Far away, the hidden sanctuary continued waiting beyond the light that had appeared on the ridge, not as a reward for ambition, but as a reminder that the greatest journeys begin with compassion. And throughout the generations that followed, whenever children asked why the kingdom remembered one gentle Omega more fondly than countless mighty warriors, their parents always gave the same answer. Real strength never demanded to be feared. Real strength chose to protect, to heal, and to love. That was the gift the ancient dragon recognized. That was the lesson the Alpha King carried for the rest of his life. And that was why hope continued to rise with every new dawn across the northern territories.